if I told you that everything you believed was a lie? For centuries, popular culture has portrayed one civilization as peaceful stargazers and another as brutal conquerors. We've often been led to believe that one group of people did nothing but gaze at the sky, while the others spent their time shedding the blood of their neighbors.
But such simplistic portrayals severely distort the true history of the great empires of the past.
It's time to set aside the old textbooks and look at the hard facts, which reveal a completely different picture of life in ancient societies. We will compare their methods of governance, urban planning decisions, and political intrigues in detail. You will see how the idea of the supreme ruler's greatness and the insignificance of the common person was instilled through the architecture of cities. Vast squares and majestic temples served as backdrops for mass rituals designed to unite the people around their leader. It is fascinating to trace how these empires dealt with internal crises and uprisings by oppressed peoples. They established unique intelligence and informant networks that allowed them to crush any rebellion in its infancy.
The engineering mindset of the time was focused on building roads and fortresses to ensure the fastest possible movement of punitive forces.
Even the most remote provinces felt the heavy hand of the central authority, which showed no mercy for weakness. Watch the video to the end, and you'll discover which of these cultures built the more sophisticated machine of subjugation. Are you ready to learn the truth about the true architects of monumental dictatorship? Many mistakenly attribute the status of the harshest rulers exclusively to the leaders of the Aztec alliance. However, Mayan engineers began erecting their terrifying stone labyrinths a full millennium before the rise of Tenochtitlan. Their cities, deep within the tropical forests, were designed as gigantic instruments of psychological pressure on the common people. Every plaza and every facade served as a visual testament to the unshakable power of the ruling dynasties. Mayan rulers did not simply build temples for religious purposes.
They created complex architectural complexes with narrow corridors and steep staircases.
Such a design made any visitor feel small and vulnerable in the face of the state. Tall stepped platforms visually elevated the elite above the crowd, creating an insurmountable distance. Even the acoustics of the main plazas were designed so that the leader's voice would drown out any whisper of discontent. Regular public ceremonies played an important role in maintaining discipline. Complex rituals were held atop the pyramids, designed to demonstrate the ruler's connection to the higher powers. These theatrical performances drew thousands of spectators from all over the region. Participation was mandatory to maintain every citizen's social status. Refusal to attend was viewed as a direct challenge to the state apparatus. Symbolic offerings held a special place in Maya culture. Long before the Aztecs appeared, they had developed complex rituals for transferring life energy to the higher powers. These ceremonies were distinguished by incredible sophistication and strict adherence to ancient protocols.
Representatives of the defeated elites from neighboring cities often became the main participants in such events.
Their public symbolic fall served as a lesson for all potential opponents of the regime. Every successful military campaign ended with large-scale renovations in the center of the victorious city. Rulers ordered the erection of new stelae describing their triumphs. These stone pillars recorded in detail the dates of victories and the names of defeated rivals. In this way, history was rewritten right before the eyes of a single generation. Stone became the primary tool for establishing the new political reality. The life of an ordinary Maya person was governed by a strict calendar cycle. Every action, from planting corn to the start of construction, was coordinated with the movement of the celestial bodies. Priests were the sole interpreters of this complex schedule. The engineering achievements of this civilization still inspire awe in modern researchers. They managed to build a sustainable society under extremely harsh climatic conditions and a shortage of water resources. However, the price of this success was unimaginably high for each individual. We'd love to hear your thoughts on this civilization's governance methods. Please share them in the comments and be sure to subscribe to our channel. I discovered this by accident, but the scale of Aztec organizational thinking is mind-boggling. The empire, centered in Tenochtitlan, was established in a historically insignificant amount of time. Unlike the scattered Maya cities, the Aztecs built a rigid, centralized system for governing vast territories. Their capital was located on artificial islands in the middle of a large lake. This location alone served as a powerful defensive and psychological barrier. The city was a masterpiece of the engineering and logistical thinking of its time. Straight causeways connected the island capital to the shores, ensuring the rapid movement of troops. Wide canals served as transport arteries for delivering goods from all corners of the empire. The city center was crowned by a gigantic temple complex, visible for many kilometers around.
It served as a constant reminder of the might of the alliance of the three cities.
The Aztec army was radically different from the military formations of its predecessors. It was a professional machine for seizing new territories and resources. Every adult man underwent mandatory military training in special state schools. Social advancement depended directly on success on the battlefield. This system created a society entirely focused on constant expansion. Aztec religious rituals were grandiose theatrical productions on a national scale. Ceremonies were held according to a strict schedule and required the participation of thousands of people. High priests acted as directors of these terrifying mass scenes. Captured leaders and warriors became the main participants in these ritual acts atop the pyramids. In this way, the empire demonstrated its absolute dominance over any political rivals. Life in the capital was strictly regulated and governed by harsh laws. Order was enforced by special officials endowed with broad powers.
Any violation of the rules of conduct or attempt at fraud in the marketplace led to swift trials.
The system of punishments was designed to serve as a lesson to everyone around. Fear of the state apparatus was the main glue holding society together. Despite its harshness, the empire provided a high level of social mobility for those who distinguished themselves. An outstanding warrior from the lower classes could receive a land grant and prestigious status. The state encouraged talent in engineering, architecture, and trade. A complex system of markets supplied the population with goods from the farthest corners of the continent. This created the illusion of prosperity, entirely dependent on military successes. However, this dependence on constant expansion harbored a major vulnerability. The conquered peoples hated their rulers in the capital and were merely waiting for a pretext to revolt. The Aztecs had to maintain huge garrisons in distant provinces to keep order. Logistical chains stretched for hundreds of kilometers, becoming increasingly fragile. The system operated at the limits of its capacity, constantly demanding new infusions of resources. It was precisely this internal tension that made the empire vulnerable to external intervention. Monumental architecture and harsh laws could not conceal the growing discontent of the subjugated masses. What architectural techniques do you think allowed ancient builders to reinforce the effect of oppression without creating a unified empire? The hidden truth that everyone keeps silent lies in the very structure of ancient settlements. Unlike the cities we are accustomed to, Mayan centers did not have residential quarters in the modern sense. They were rather gigantic ceremonial complexes, closed off to the permanent residence of ordinary people. The homes of farmers were scattered around these stone cores across vast territories. Ordinary residents were allowed into the central plazas only on strictly designated days of festivals and rituals. This division of space created a colossal social distance between the elite and the people.
The rulers' palaces rose on massive platforms, restricting access to outsiders.
A complex system of inner courtyards and passageways created labyrinths comprehensible only to the initiated. Each entrance was guarded by special guards who meticulously checked the status of visitors. The city's layout literally dictated a person's place in the social hierarchy. Water management was also subordinated to the goals of political control. In regions with prolonged droughts, rulers built gigantic reservoirs in city centers. Access to water during difficult months became a primary privilege and a tool for blackmail. The elite distributed life-sustaining water in exchange for loyalty and free labor. Engineering networks turned into networks of social dependence. Interestingly, many Maya cities were suddenly abandoned by their inhabitants. For many years, researchers puzzled over the reasons for this mass exodus. Today, it is believed that the system of total control simply collapsed under the weight of its own ambitions. Endless construction projects depleted natural resources and the patience of the common people. People simply fled into the jungle, leaving the stone monuments to the ravages of time. The Aztecs took a different approach to urban planning, opting for dense development. Their capital was divided into strictly rectangular blocks, each with a specific function. Every district had its own small temples, markets, and administrative buildings. This allowed officials to easily monitor the movements and activities of the city's inhabitants. The city's island location made unauthorized exit beyond its boundaries virtually impossible. The center of Tenochtitlan was a vast, walled plaza to which the main avenues led.
It was the heart of the empire, the seat of religious and political power.
Here were located the main armories, treasuries, and schools for the nobility. The architecture of this district was designed to overwhelm delegations from the conquered provinces. Envoys were meant to return home, feeling utterly insignificant. Comparing these approaches, it's hard to say whose method was more intimidating. The invisible walls of social distance in the Maya world, or the rigid framework of the Aztec island city, were equally effective at suppressing individuality. If you like this documentary investigation, be sure to like this video. What if everything you were taught about ancient conflicts is hopelessly outdated? We are accustomed to imagining battles of the past as open clashes between massive armies on flat fields. In Central America, the terrain dictated a completely different approach to warfare. Dense tropical forests ruled out the use of classic military maneuvers. War here became a series of sudden ambushes and swift raids by small units. Mayan warriors were masters of camouflage and stealthy movement in the challenging jungle environment. They used natural materials to create inconspicuous shelters and traps. A unit could wait for the enemy for days without making a single sound or movement. The element of surprise was their main advantage in the struggle for dominance in the region. This tactic wore down the enemy with the constant fear of an attack coming out of nowhere. The psychological pressure began long before any physical contact between the opposing sides. The attackers used special noise-making instruments to create panic in the enemy's ranks. Loud whistles, the sharp sounds of conch shells, and drum beats shattered the night silence of the jungle. In the darkness of the forest, these sounds seemed to herald the presence of a vast and invincible force. The enemy often lost their composure and broke ranks even before the active phase of the battle began. The Aztecs adopted many elements of this psychological warfare, adapting them to their own scale. Their armies consisted of tens of thousands of disciplined fighters, divided into specialized units. They used war paint and intimidating regalia to demoralize the enemy. Before battle, special orators delivered speeches extolling the empire's invincibility. This verbal pressure was an integral part of their military doctrine. Veterans, united in elite brotherhoods, played a special role in the Aztec army. Admission to these orders was possible only after performing outstanding feats. They wore unique uniforms and enjoyed immense respect in society. The appearance of these fighters on the battlefield often forced the enemy's poorly trained militia to retreat. Their reputation as uncompromising warriors preceded them, doing half the work. In addition to direct military aggression, the empires actively employed diplomatic pressure. Ultimatums were sent to enemy rulers, detailing the consequences of refusing to submit. Envoys described in detail the might of the army and the severity of the impending punishments. Often, cities surrendered without a fight, preferring to pay tribute rather than see their economies destroyed. The fear of a possible conflict proved more effective than the conflict itself. Success on the battlefield always depended on meticulous preparation and cold calculation. Emotions and chivalry had no place in these pragmatic and brutal wars over resources. In the next chapter, you will learn exactly how they distributed these vast resources to sustain their system. The economic model of both civilizations was built on strict accounting and the rigorous extraction of resources from subordinate territories. The Aztec Empire perfected this system, turning the collection of tribute into the main branch of state administration. Special scribes kept detailed records of how much and what goods each province was required to supply. These lists have survived to this day, astonishing us with their meticulousness and the scale of the required deliveries. No region could evade its obligations to the capital. The list of required goods depended on the climatic characteristics and natural resources of a particular region. Some provinces supplied cotton, cocoa beans, and precious stones. Others were required to send building materials, timber, and food for the capital's garrisons. Rare types of tropical raw materials used to create regalia for the highest nobility were particularly prized. This continuous flow of material wealth ensured a life of luxury for the rulers of Tenochtitlan. Economic pressure was used as an effective tool of political coercion. Increasing the size of the tribute often served as punishment for displays of disloyalty or attempts at rebellion. Rebellious provinces were burdened with exorbitant taxes, leading to their complete ruin and decline. Such a policy ensured that potential rebels would simply lack the resources to wage war. The poverty of the subjects was a guarantee of the capital's elite security. A special caste of merchants carried out important state assignments, combining business with politics. They equipped caravans bound for the most remote and dangerous regions of the continent. These expeditions often served as a pretext for reconnaissance and subsequent military invasion. If a caravan was attacked, the empire had a legitimate reason to launch a punitive expedition. Thus, trade always went hand in hand with expansion. Agricultural policy was based on maximizing the use of available land. The Aztecs created a unique system of artificial floating islands for growing vegetables and flowers. This technology allowed for multiple harvests per year, providing a massive metropolis with fresh food. The Maya built complex systems of terraces on hillsides to prevent soil erosion. The farmers' labor was incredibly hard, but it was precisely this labor that fed the entire state apparatus. It is astonishing how these civilizations managed to create such complex financial mechanisms without the use of metal coins. Their economies were built on strict accounting, logistics, and the power of state coercion. This system functioned flawlessly for centuries until it faced a completely new challenge. The European economic model changed these lands forever. Guess what happened next when the ships of European expeditions appeared on the horizon? The meeting of two completely different civilizations became one of the most dramatic moments in world history. Armed bands of conquistadors arrived on the continent in search of riches and new territories for their crown. They discovered not primitive settlements, but vast empires with complex political and social structures. This clash became a test of strength for all the governing systems that existed at the time. The Aztec ruler initially tried to use diplomacy to neutralize the new threat. He sent generous gifts to the conquistadors, hoping that the riches would make them turn back. However, the sight of gold had the exact opposite effect on the ambitious explorers. They realized that the rumors of incredible treasures in these lands were entirely true. Every gift only intensified their desire to reach the empire's capital. By the time the Europeans arrived, the Maya no longer had any unified major centers of influence. Their city-states were in a state of permanent political decline and fragmentation. However, it was precisely this disunity that made their conquest an incredibly complex and lengthy process. The Spanish had to subdue each settlement individually, expending enormous resources in the process. The jungle provided excellent cover for the bands that resisted the new authority for decades. European explorers were amazed by the monumentality of the ancient architectural complexes they discovered. In their reports, they described vast markets, clean streets, and complex canal systems. These documents became the first evidence of the grandeur of civilizations about which Europe knew nothing. However, admiration for the engineering did not prevent the conquistadors from systematically destroying the foundations of these societies. The new rulers sought to completely reshape the social structure to suit their needs. This was not merely a military conflict, but a complete replacement of one reality with another. Traditional calendars, writing systems, and social institutions were virtually erased from daily life. New administrative and religious buildings began to rise on the ruins of ancient pyramids. The stone of the fallen empires served as the foundation for the construction of colonial cities. History began a new era in these lands. The success of the Spanish campaign was largely determined by technological superiority in key areas. Armor and tactics became decisive factors in direct clashes on the battlefield. In the next chapter, you will learn exactly which tools and technologies determined the outcome of this historic confrontation. The foundation of the technological power of pre-Columbian civilizations was the masterful use of natural minerals. Obsidian, or volcanic glass, served as the primary material for making tools and weapons. Local craftsmen learned to chip this stone to produce blades of incredible sharpness. In terms of cutting ability, obsidian edges surpassed many early metal tools. It was these sharp blades that became a symbol of the region's technological advancement for millennia. Aztec weapons consisted of a complex combination of wood and volcanic glass. Their famous swords consisted of a flat wooden base with obsidian shards embedded in grooves. With a precise strike, this weapon inflicted massive damage on the enemy's armor. However, they were extremely fragile and quickly became unusable upon contact with hard surfaces. Warriors had to carry spare blades with them to repair their weapons right in the heat of battle. The Spanish also employed new methods of transporting and moving cargo. Wheeled carts revolutionized the logistics of supplying military expeditions. This made it possible to transport heavy artillery and large supplies of provisions over considerable distances. The Aztecs and Maya relied exclusively on the human strength of porters, which severely limited their mobility. European logistics proved to be better suited to protracted military campaigns. The conquistadors' construction technologies quickly supplanted traditional building methods. Spanish engineers used iron tools to quickly work stone blocks. They brought with them the technology for creating sturdy arched vaults and domes. Local builders adopted these innovations, adapting them to new architectural designs. Ancient masonry methods gave way to more efficient European standards. The region's agriculture underwent radical changes with the advent of new tools. Iron implements made it possible to clear the jungle for farmland more quickly. The efficiency of farmers' labor increased several-fold compared to ancient methods. However, the fruits of this labor were now entirely controlled by the new colonial administration. Technological progress did not bring relief to the common people, but only intensified their exploitation. The clash between glass and steel ended in an unqualified victory for the more advanced materials. Obsidian workshops gradually closed, giving way to metallurgical furnaces. The traditional craft survived only in the form of souvenirs and jewelry. The technological gap proved too wide for the ancient empires to bridge in the short term. This lesson from history vividly demonstrates how innovations determine the fate of entire peoples. The architecture of ancient plazas was not merely a backdrop, but an active participant in social processes. Every centimeter of these spaces was designed with strict symbolic significance in mind. Mayan central plazas were often covered in snow-white plaster that glistened dazzlingly in the tropical sun. This dazzling glow created a sense of unreality for everyone gathered there. The space was visually cleansed of all mundane elements, preparing the mind to receive important state messages. In the center of the Aztec capital stood the Great Temple, a massive double pyramid. This structure symbolized the sacred mountains where water and seed reserves were stored. The double structure reflected the dualism of their worldview, uniting the aspects of agriculture and war. The height of the structure allowed one to observe what was happening at the summit from any point in the vast city. This represented the constant visual dominance of authority over the daily hustle and bustle of the metropolis. Ritual platforms served as a stage for large-scale state celebrations. They were decorated with bright banners, flowers, and special incense burners. Thick smoke from aromatic resins obscured the details of the ceremonies, adding to their mystery. The sounds of flutes and the muffled beats of drums created a hypnotic rhythm, lulling the crowd into a trance. In such an atmosphere, every word of the ruler was perceived as absolute truth. The layout of the buildings was strictly oriented according to the cardinal directions and astronomical phenomena. The windows and doorways in certain temples aligned with the points of sunrise on the equinoxes. This allowed the priests to measure time precisely and demonstrate their power over natural cycles. The illusion of control over the sun's movement was a powerful propaganda tool. The masses believed that without these rituals, the world would simply cease to exist. Hidden underground tunnels and chambers beneath the temples added an air of mysticism to the ruler's image. Priests could appear unnoticed at the tops of the pyramids, as if materializing out of thin air. These architectural tricks were used to create the illusion of the elite's supernatural abilities. Secret passages also served as safe escape routes in case of urban uprisings. Rulers always left themselves room to maneuver within the labyrinths of their own palaces. All this monumental theatricality required colossal efforts to maintain in perfect condition. The walls were regularly replastered and repainted with fresh colors by master craftsmen. Crumbling carvings were immediately restored so as not to disrupt the image of eternal and indestructible order. The symbolism of these spaces worked only when they looked flawless. Any crack in a temple wall could be perceived as a weakness of the authority itself. The daily life of the common person in both civilizations was filled with hard labor and strict restrictions. A farmer's day began before dawn and ended at sunset in the cornfields. Families lived in modest huts made of clay-coated poles with roofs of palm leaves. Their entire material culture was limited to simple pottery, mats, and a few stone tools. Improving living conditions was practically impossible due to the harsh tax system. Clothing served as a clear marker of social status and was strictly regulated by law. Common people were forbidden to wear cotton fabrics. They made do with coarse garments made from agave fibers. The use of bright dyes and intricate patterns was an exclusive privilege of the upper classes. Violations of these rules were met with severe punishments, including imprisonment. A person was required to demonstrate their place in society at first glance. The institution of marriage was governed by tradition and often had a pragmatic nature. Unions were formed by agreement between families to consolidate landholdings or resources. Polygamy was practiced among the nobility, allowing them to build extensive networks of political alliances. Commoners were limited to one spouse, with whom they managed a difficult household. Divorce was possible, but required compelling reasons and the approval of local judges. Justice was swift, strict, and did not allow for lengthy proceedings. There were special courts for the nobility and commoners, but the laws were equally harsh for everyone. Theft, official corruption, and insubordination were punished with radical methods in city squares. Such intransigence kept the level of petty crime in cities very low. Fear of the system was the most effective police force in these societies. Free time was a rare luxury for the working person in pre-Columbian America. Holidays were strictly regulated by the state calendar and devoted to mandatory ceremonies. True rest was possible only during the brief periods between planting and harvesting. People gathered for evening gatherings, told stories, and engaged in small-scale domestic crafts. These moments were the only respite in the endless cycle of labor. The information vacuum was yet another tool for controlling the masses. All news came only from official heralds in the central squares. Ordinary people had no access to the records stored in closed libraries. They knew only what the rulers deemed necessary to tell them at that moment. This ruled out the possibility of dissent spreading and alternative political views forming. The entire system was designed so that people felt like mere cogs in a giant machine. Individuality was suppressed for the sake of the community's well-being and the state's prosperity. This harsh but effective model allowed empires to exist and expand over the centuries. Everyday life was devoid of romance, representing a harsh struggle for survival. Today, all that remains of the grandeur of these empires are stone ruins scattered across forests and valleys. However, their cultural and political legacy proved far more enduring than obsidian weapons. Both civilizations proved that human intellect is capable of creating the most complex social structures in isolation. Their engineering, astronomy, and mathematics are still studied by scholars from around the world. They left behind more questions about the nature of power than answers. The Aztec model of aggressive centralization became a classic example of rapid and brutal imperial expansion. They demonstrated how logistics and discipline can compensate for a lack of technological development. Their capital became the prototype for modern megacities, with their problems of overpopulation and dependence on the periphery. Tenochtitlan's market system anticipated many principles of modern global trade. This experience of governing vast populations remains a relevant subject for historical research. The Maya left us a lesson about the fragility of even the most stable political systems. Their network of independent city-states demonstrated a brilliant flourishing of culture and art. But this same system showed how endless internal competition leads to the depletion of resources. Their disappearance serves as a stark reminder of the importance of balancing the ambitions of the elite with the environment. The architectural labyrinths of the Maya have become a monument to excessive human pride. Today, The descendants of these great builders continue to live on their ancestral lands. They have preserved many languages, crafts, and traditions despite centuries of colonial pressure. Traditional ornamentation, farming methods, and culinary recipes are still alive today. This quiet resistance to the passage of time proves that culture is stronger than any political dictate. Stone may crumble, but the collective memory possesses incredible resilience. Studying their history helps us better understand the mechanisms of state formation. We see how the same instruments of power were invented independently in different parts of the world. Propaganda, social distancing, and a monopoly on information. These are all universal concepts. The ancient empires of Central America perfected the use of these concepts to a frightening degree. Their experience serves as an excellent mirror for analyzing modern political systems. When answering the question of who was harsher in their methods, we must look beyond the surface. True cruelty lay not in theatrical ceremonies, but in a system of total human powerlessness. The inability to change one's fate, a strict caste system, and constant fear were the defining characteristics of the era. Both civilizations succeeded in creating perfect machines for transforming human potential into national greatness. Choosing between them is merely a choice between different forms of dictatorship. The ruins of these cities now attract millions of tourists, captivating them with their beauty and mystery. But behind every beautiful facade lies a story of incredible human exertion. The stones of these pyramids bear witness to the colossal labor of nameless builders who gave their strength for the sake of their rulers' ambitions. Recognizing this cost makes our admiration for ancient architecture deeper and more meaningful. True history is always more complex and dramatic than beautiful myths. The legacy of the Maya and Aztecs is not just gold jewelry and museum display cases. It is a harsh lesson about how easily society can become a tool for serving the elites. It is a reminder of the importance of freedom, education, and respect for every individual. By remembering their historical mistakes, we can try to avoid repeating similar scenarios in the future. We have analyzed the two greatest empires of the past, their methods of warfare, construction, and mass control. Each left its own unique, albeit frightening, mark on world history. Which of these civilizations do you think built a more sophisticated system of state control? Share your thoughts in the comments because every opinion helps shed new light on history. And be sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our new in-depth historical investigations.